Hello, my name is Nat Reeves, jazz bassist, jazz educator, jazz recording artist, jazz role model, and mentor to many musicians today. Before I begin my story, I'd like to thank Gail Board for making this an opportunity for me to speak to you, and a big hello to Lois Gilbert for her support as well. I was given some questions to talk to you about how I got started in music. So as a young boy growing up in Virginia, I was my grandfather, who was a musician. He played the guitar and the mandolin, the banjo, harmonica, harp. He played all the music. We grew up in Virginia in the Blue Ridge Mountains, the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains. He saw how excited I was about sound and rhythm. So he took the time to build bird houses, small bird houses in the backyard. He built a koi pond or a goldfish pond in the back. So he really put together a very beautiful nature sanctuary for me, so I would have a place to go. So I would listen to the birds and just listen to how they would sing and go back and forth, call and response. It was really exciting to me. Then also I would hear the train go by, and he would say to me, he said, "Son, you hear that train? It's always on time and it has a flow." So I had the harmony of the birds, at the flow of the train, and the time. And then I discovered the wash machine. When my mother would wash clothes, the rhythm of the wash machine was so exciting to me. So I had those three elements that really got me to the list to listen. So I started off closely listening. And as I moved towards a kid, I would watch TV. I think probably one of the first musicians that I actually paid attention to and noticed was Nat King Cole's show and Sanford and Son and Music on the Dick Cavett Show. All of these shows got me excited about music even more. But as a kid, of course, you go through this transition of sports. So I played sports. I ran track, played football, played basketball up until I was about 16. And then one day, I went into the basement where we had a full, uh, he had my grandfather put a woodworking area together because he made all kinds of things, chairs, and he built all kinds of rocking chairs and whatnot stands, they called them. So he was a woodworker. He built the house we lived in. He was a mason. So he really worked hard. And he wanted me to know how all of that happened, how what I should know about all that. So he got me into gardening. We went fishing. So he really, my roots came from all of that. And it was exciting. So when I was 16, he gave me his guitar. So I started playing the bass notes on his guitar. And so on my 16th birthday, he bought me a bass from Sears and Roebuck. It's a Hofner bass. It was like a violin shaped bass. So my best friend and I, Larry Scott, Larry bought a drum set. So we decided let's join a band. So there was a band in town that needed a drummer and bass player. So we joined the band. The band was called the Donatones. I was 16 or so then. We played all the proms, dances, and everything. We would learn music that would come on the radio, all the top 40 music by ear. One person at a time would go into the practice room and learn the songs. So we became very popular in the area, and I became a little bit more interested in the bass. So that's when I bought my first, I guess it was record, LPs then. I bought a Stanley Clark record and Jaco Pastorius record. So I wanted to refine my bass skills. But all the time, James Jamerson was my hero. I loved the bass line. So listening to Motown music or soul music, which all had strong bass lines, was something I took really seriously. So we worked around town until the band kind of disbanded. And I had another friend who was in another group that was so many bands in Lynchburg, Virginia, that that was something I really wanted to do because I knew that music could take me to other places. So my friend Ronnie Rathers had some connections, and he says, Nat, there's a band in Richmond, Virginia looking for a bass player, and they play jazz. So I had a little time to kind of investigate what I thought was jazz, with Chuck Mangione and some of the fusion music. So I took a chance at it. I got to Richmond, Virginia, and grandfather being my first mentor. Second mentor was a trumpeter named Tom Mitchell. So when I arrived in Richmond, Virginia, he told me my grandfather had passed away. So he gave me money, took me to a parking lot and showed me how to drive a Volkswagen car. And I did that, went home, got myself together, came back, played in Richmond. That's when I met Randy Johnston, guitarist, and he and I were on a mission to get to New York. So we would take trips up to New York City from Richmond just to go listen to musicians play. So that was exciting too, because I had a chance to really go see the musicians live. So from Lynchburg, Virginia to Richmond, Virginia, then we would take trips to New York to hear the music. So when I came home back to Lynchburg, my friend Ronnie also had a connection for me in Hartford, Connecticut. There was a woman here in town named Roberta Peck Vader. She had a group and she had work in Hartford. So both Ronnie and I came to Hartford on a tractor trailer truck. I had $20 and took a chance. That was right around 70, maybe 75. Took a chance, got to Richmond, Virginia, and met Tom Mitchell, who also helped me do what I had to do too. Got to Hartford. Get to Hartford. I'm in Hartford for just a little while, and I get a phone call to go to New York because I had another friend who was from Virginia who lived in New York. He called me. He said, "Why don't you come down to New York City and listen to the music here? If you're as good as any of those guys, you can learn to play down here." I took another chance. I went to New York City, played on the streets, played in jam sessions, and that's when I met Kenny Garrett. I met Kenny Garrett at a jam session at Fuku Tanada's place. This was like late 70s. There were a lot of musicians who were just moving into New York City. I remember meeting Mark Johnson and Randy Johnston. Not Randy wasn't there, but Branford Marsalis and some of the musicians of that level were all moving into New York City. So I got the call to go to Japan to play with Sonny Stitt. I got that call from Maxine Gregg. So the first trip abroad for me was with Sonny Stitt. And that's when I met James Williams and Vinnie Johnson. A lot happened in New York. A lot happened in Richmond. A lot happened in Lynchburg. My foundation came from those three places. So once I came back home from Japan, because that was Sonny's last tour, that's when Jackie McLean asked me to come to his house. So I went to his house and we listened to Sonny Stitt's last notes being played. And from that point on, from 1982 to 1986, that was when I got involved with Jackie's program at the Artist Collective and at the University of Hartford. I would play in Jackie's saxophone class, and then slowly I would do ensembles. He really took me under his wing. He's over my back this way, J. Mac. And so I would, drive him to Boston to have his horn fixed. I'd drive him to New York to see his mom. Became very good friends. I hadn't played a note yet with him, but I was learning from him. He was mentoring me and getting me ready. So then one day he asked me if I could read some chord changes, which I could pretty well. So he invited me to perform with him on a performance that he had at the University of Hartford. He had a bass player, but he invited me to sit in at the same time. So he was checking me out, giving me some advice, saying things like to see you before they hear you, be on time. It's a cross country race. There's a lot of great musicians out there. Don't get comfortable. And I listened to all of that. And he gave me a platform to develop my skills. So we went to Japan with Jack Wilson, 87, 1988, and Mark Johnson on drums. That was a learning experience. So I was being mentored by Jackie and Jack Wilson. Jack was a pianist, so Jack had some things to say to me as well. And a lot of times there wasn't things being said. You had to listen closely to what was going on. That's where you got your information from. Things continued. I continued to work with Jackie. I went to Atlanta, Georgia, the Atlanta Jazz Festival with Arthur Taylor, Walter Bishop Jr., and Jackie McLean. Then I went to Montreal with Jackie, and I think that was Tony Rita's Hotep Galetta. Went to Italy with Walter Davis, and Ronnie Barrage, and we did tours there as well. So there was a lot of great things happening for me as far as being mentored. A lot of it had to do with just listening and paying attention to what was going on. I got a lot of good advice from him. I'm going to look at a few notes because it's a lot to talk about, and I don't want to miss anything. So the musicians that I met through Jackie, I met Gil Noble, who was a wonderful man who worked in television, ABC, I think is from Clear. Renee McLean, his son. Curtis Fuller was a mentor. Of course, I mentioned Walter Davis, Arthur Taylor, Donald Byrd. I recorded with Woody Shaw and Kenny Garrett. I recorded with Cedar Walton. Jackie introduced me to Miles Davis in Paris. Met Dizzy Gillespie and Roy Haynes through Jackie McLean. I got advice from Walter Bolden about how to play time. And there's Bill Byrne, George Coleman, Larry Willis, Jimmy Cobb, Bobby Hutcherson, Louis Hayes, Louis Nash. It's just so many musicians. It was an unbelievable time. So as we continued to play together, in 1990, I went to the Jazz Bowl 90 with Kenny Drew and Donald Byrd. And then 93, we went to South Africa. We did a tour in South Africa with Jackie. 94, tribute to Benny Carter. 95, I took a group to South Africa with the Thelonious Monk Winners, which was something very special. 1996 tour with Pat Metheny, Kenny Garrett, Brian Blade. And then in 1999, I started working with Kenny Garrett, Jeff Tane Watts, and Kenny Kirkland. All this is happening, but I'm still at the University of Hartford, just working more on that administrative side as well as performance side. And in 1998, I had 3 performances with Sting because of Kenny Kirkland's association with Sting. Then 2000 came. I started doing a lot of recordings. Did a saxophone summit with Jackie McLean, Renee McLean, Gary Botts, and James Moody, Hotep Galetta, South African pianist, and Ronnie Barrage. That was a great tour as well. 2007 to 2018, I would go to Japan regularly with Harold Mayburn, Joe Farnsworth, and Eric Alexander. I'm going to go back to Hartford because I met Joe Farnsworth in Hartford. He used to come down to the 880 Club, which is a club where everybody would play. And he would always come and see me. And he, as you can see today, it's time to swing. He's on top of his game. He learned like me from the source. I'd like to thank him publicly for all of his help in continuing my career. A lot of good love from him. I enjoy working with all the great players that are younger than me. I will name a few. There are so many students, so many people that I could talk about. Talk about Steve Davis, how much I Enjoy working with him. He was one of the first students at the Hart School. Eric McPherson, Abe Burton, Jimmy Green, Desmond Douglas, Brandon Younger. Congratulations for your Grammy nomination. Jonathan Barber, Table Gable, Andrew Renfro, Rick Bugle, Mike DeRubo, Tony Leone, Sarah Hanahan, John Hasselback, all the bass students I've had. I like to thank them all for what they're doing, and I'm happy for their accomplishments. I'm here if there's some good, if you have any questions for me, I like to have some questions, or I'll keep going on. Tony Leone was another special person. The University of Hartford, I have to thank all the professors there for all the support they gave me. I learned from everybody. I have learned from everybody. You know, my advice to the young musicians is to listen and play your heart out. Listen to all the great composers. Play the music like you love it. You know, like there's this one thing I picked up today. I always pick a card every day just to see where I'm at in my life. The card today is it's called Arrow, aim, focus, action. To create anything, you have to show up, commit, and keep showing up and time again. Even if you feel defeated, be clear in your intentions and enjoy your way with great stamina because your way will define your unique gift. This is a lifelong commitment that has everything to do with passion, as passion will help you go the distance. No one said this would be easy, but the rewards will far outweigh the long hours. Great practice and commitment lead the way to great work, and this applies to everything. Consider yourself, your life, your greatest artwork, and your greatest journey yet. Are you committed? Distractions are put aside so that you can get to what you're trying to do. I I have a lot of different projects going on. I think the most fun I've had is playing with my students at the university and getting to know the students, because it's not just playing like just okay, I'm playing the bass. You have to get spiritual. I think what the pandemic has done for me is made me go back and see how all this came about, get myself even more organized, and to offer myself to any young musician who wants a mentor or someone to talk to. I have I have hundreds of live recordings that no one's heard. I have some good advice. If you want to play, you can come here, or I can come to you. I like to thank Happy Birthday, Max Roach, and I like to thank everybody that's out there listening, and continue what you're doing. Are there any questions? I think the questions will help me to stay with what I'm talking about. So, okay, I'll ask my question. I'll ask myself a question. So, what is the most important thing about being a musician? I think the most important thing is to tell your story, and but don't think it's just your story. Your story is everybody's story. Stay connected to your musicians. Make sure that everybody knows what they're doing. Focus on the older musicians. What has been my biggest career challenge to date? My biggest career challenge probably was jazz education, because jazz education is more than just performance. You have to put together paperwork, your resume, your CV. You have to learn the technology. The challenge probably was switching from teaching one way to teaching another way, teaching with the technology, learning what's out there for you, what podcasts are out there, learning how to get a good sound on your computer just as well as a good sound on your instrument. It's challenges. We don't have the same time we used to have. Everything is scheduled. When I was in the 80s and 90s, there weren't any smartphones. There was much more communication. Now you send a text, you don't talk. it's very important to not lose your voice if you in this game. I understand the fact that it's easier sometimes to send a text, but it's nothing like a voice. It's important to hear that voice and to connect with the other musicians so that it sounds good. We I could never try to ask too many questions to some of the masters. I would let them tell me what they thought about it. Never ask them how it sound. How does it sound? I remember one time Jagger said, don't ask somebody how you sound. They might tell you one day, and it might not be too much fun to hear. Just play with other musicians. Try to form a band. Do what you can do. Stay out of harm's way. We're in a pandemic now, so it's not as easy to be close to each other. There's a presence in the music. So when I play the bass, I don't only play the notes. There's an energy. There's a flow. Back to the train. There's a flow. The pandemic took me back to nature. I was getting up every morning about before the sunrise, depending on how far I would go, just to watch the sunset or just to hear sound that was not music, birds, or the flow of the water. So I think as you get closer to spirituality, your playing becomes better. You know, how much love from the Memphis Jazz Workshop. Love from the Memphis Jazz Workshop. I hope I can make it there to see you very soon. I will. I'll be there in Memphis soon. Do you think the technological advances serve as an enhancement in the jazz music education or not quite? Well, I have to say the technology is definitely an enhancement. You can get to more things now. I remember when we would have to take a trip to Boston just to get a real book. You got everything at your fingertips, but sometimes it's so much you don't know what to do. So what I always do is I always write down what I'm going to do. Sometimes I follow what I'm supposed to do. Sometimes I get distracted. But I think if you set your goals, you set a goal, write down what you're going to do every day. Because of the pandemic, I am my own teacher now. I can give myself lessons. I can set up a playlist for things to work on. I think it's good to use the technology, but I never had a tuner when it was time to play with a band. We didn't have tuners. We did not have tuners. You had to listen to the piano. Now today we tune to our instruments to the tuner, and we don't hear we don't hear the other musicians. So a lot of times the band's out of tune. So you got to listen. The way I got past all of that when the tuners came out, I would always go over to the piano and see where it was in pitch and tune to the pitch of the piano. And that's important. I think the technology can be a curse, but you have to use it to your advantage. Learn how to use it. Learn how to get to all the podcasts and all the information that's out there. I mean, I was playing music in the 70s. I didn't know who the bass player was. I just knew I liked the bass. I fell in love with the bass. That's what carried me. Any more questions? Well, as far as getting more organized, what I mean by that is, I guess since I was traveling, I always took photographs. So I'm organizing my photographs by the country. I'm organizing my recording by the musicians that I recorded with. Just, I have so much school work that I had sitting around, so I'm trying to get everything put in a place so I can find everything. So you're in the show. Everyone can see and hear you. Thank you. I hope so. uh, I wish that I could have more time and more musicians to be in touch with me or in touch with some of the older musicians so that you could keep up with what you're doing. If you want to know more about what I've been doing, you can go to my website, natreeves.com, and you can hear what we're doing. I have a new CD that should be released in 2022, live at the Cutting Room. We recorded that. I'd like to thank Arnie Perez for giving me that opportunity to bring my group down, this group State of Emergency. I'd like to thank Gabe Herman for bringing a crew down from the University of Hartford to record us. I enjoy playing with young musicians. I appreciate what all of them are doing. I want to tell them some stories about Jackie. I like to thank just everyone for just keeping the music alive. I see the young kids out there doing it. You know, I'm 66 years old and I want to be here even longer. Keep playing the music. My group is ready to perform. If anybody's interested in hiring us or managing me, I'm ready. I'll give you the best. Um, but did you always play the bass or did you start playing something else? Well, my first instrument was, I think, they called it the recorder. Well, we called it the flutophone. It was just like a little wooden instrument we played on. But the electric bass is where I started. And I transitioned to the upright bass when I was in Richmond. When Johnny Coles used to come to town, he kept saying to me, you need to stop playing the pork chop. So like today, you have to learn all instruments, but I still just want to focus on the bass. I'm still trying to keep my bass in tune and play good time and have a good sound and live a good life. You know, living to me and being a man first, music comes second. And just always think about what people say, even when you don't like it. Listen to them. Listen to what people say. And learn to be alone. Because when you get to know yourself, you become a better player. You know, when you can be in the quiet, don't have too much going on all the time. This is a good place I'm in now because I just recently retired in June. So I have more time to think about what I'm doing and how I want to do it. You know, I have a great instrument that luckily I've had since 1977, and it's great. Someone asked me who are your favorite bass players. You know, that's something that I have to talk to you about going way back. There's so many, and as I start to do more research, I'm going back even further. So the ones that I really like the most, I put them in a grouping of Sam Jones, Ron Carter, Buster Williams, Rufus Reed. Then if I go back, Oscar Pettiford, Wilbur Ware, Leroy Vinegar. It's just so many. It's something you can learn from all bass players. You know, you have some bass players who play great bow, some bass players who play very good in the higher in the fingerboard. Like Eddie Gomez, I love his sound. Can you talk more about your career at JMI and Hart? Well, yeah, I can talk more about that. That was the best learning experience I ever had. I had not only jazz musicians that I worked with and students, as well as classical musicians and dancers. It was a every day you were on stage. Every day you're on stage. So as soon as you walk into that building, you're on stage, and you have people who want to help you. You know, I love going to the library. There was a librarian that works there now who helped me a lot, Tracy Lawler. She taught me a lot about getting around in the library, how much is available. It's a lot available. So the Hart School was very important to me. I'm just looking to see if there are any other questions. I could go on and on. Just want to say to Jackie McLean, oh, can't forget Mr. Pharoah Sanders. He's my deepest mentor today. The last concert I played live with him was virtual concert Detroit Jazz in 2020. We talk every day or so. So my bookends, Sonny Stitt to Pharoah Sanders and all in between, Houston Person, all the piano players. So much I learned from Harold Mayburn. Thank all the jazz clubs that bring me in. You know, I'm in Hartford, but I can come to New York and play with the best. So keep that in mind if you want me to come to be with you. I want to learn how to play the piano now. Someone just gave me a piano, so I'm starting to compose now, working on some of my own music because I can work on my own schedule. Things seem to flow better today. I'd like to thank you very much for this time to talk to you. And I hope that you enjoyed my conversation. And I'll talk to you very soon.